I am Mark Winter, a freelance journalist specializing in urban legends and paranormal phenomena. Recently, an anonymous employee from the Hamburg metro company sent me a disturbing piece of surveillance footage. The footage was recorded at midnight. A woman in a long red dress stood at the very edge of an empty platform, her head bowed, her body unnaturally stiff. Her face, however, was blurred beyond recognition, distorted, as if the signal had been corrupted. Each time a train approached, she would lean forward, as though preparing to jump. But after the train passed, she remained there, unmoving, never leaving. The metro employee who provided the footage told me something even more unsettling. They had been deleting this recording for years, but no matter what they did, it always reappeared on the server. Driven by instinct, I began looking into the identity of this mysterious woman. After combing through records, I found a chilling connection. Her dress matched the style worn by a woman who vanished 20 years ago in a metro accident. Her name was Isabelle Krüger. She disappeared on line 2 of the Hamburg metro, right on the platform. Witnesses reported seeing her pull beneath the train as if by some invisible force. Yet, her body was never found. So, had she really died? Or had she never truly left? I delved deeper into the case, old newspapers, police archives, any records I could find. But something wasn't right. Isabelle's records were shockingly incomplete. Even her family had never spoken publicly about her disappearance. Then, I noticed something truly disturbing. Her name kept disappearing. In the archives, her photos were cropped out. Her name in documents was blurred with ink. In some articles, she had been entirely erased. Uneasy, I reached out to an old metro worker who had been there the night Isabelle vanished. When I mentioned her name, there was a long silence on the other end of the line. Then, in a hushed, almost fearful whisper, he said, "Don't say her name again. She's still listening." That night, I boarded the last train on line 2. I chose the very platform where she had disappeared. I needed to see her with my own eyes. The station was eerily empty, swallowed by a suffocating silence. Overhead, the fluorescent lights flickered, buzzing faintly like dying insects. I stood at the edge of the platform, sweat pooling in my palms, eyes fixed on the tracks. The air reeked of metal and damp concrete, laced with something else, a faint, rotten staleness that lingered at the back of my throat. The recorded announcement for the approaching train echoed through the empty station, its mechanical voice hollow and distorted. Was she coming? I glanced down at the tracks, a gaping black void, waiting to devour anything that fell into it. Then, a chill ran down my spine. A feeling I couldn't explain, yet somehow knew all too well. I was not alone. From the corner of my eye, I saw it. A figure, standing at the far end of the platform. She stood there, motionless, as if she were completely severed from the world around her. The red dress she wore swayed ever so slightly, though there was no wind, as if some unseen force was pulling at its fabric. Her head was tilted downward, her long black hair cascading over her face, concealing every feature. Her arms hung loosely at her sides, still and lifeless. I held my breath, my heartbeat hammering against my ribs. I needed to believe that she was just another late-night commuter. A normal woman. A stranger who had accidentally wandered onto the platform. But that unnatural, suffocating fear coiled around my throat, tightening with every passing second. The approaching train's headlights cut through the darkness, flooding the platform with harsh, sterile light. And then, she lifted her head. She had no face. No eyes. No nose. No mouth. Her entire face had been erased, as though someone had ruthlessly smoothed away every feature, leaving only a blank, distorted stretch of skin. Yet even without eyes, I felt her staring at me. That gaze, cold, empty, an abyss with no end, bore into me like an invisible dagger. The train roared through the tunnel, the vibration rattling the tiles beneath my feet. Her dress quivered in the wind, but she did not move. She just stood there. A split second of pure, primal terror crashed over me, my mind screaming at me to move, to run. But my body refused. I wanted to look away. I couldn't. The train was almost here now, the gusts of air tugging at my coat. And then, she stepped forward. She stood at the very edge of the platform, toes nearly dangling over the gap. She should have fallen. She didn't. Instead, she tilted her head ever so slightly, her blank face turned directly toward me. Waiting. The train screeched into the station, its brakes screaming against the rails. I blinked. And she was gone. My pulse thundered in my ears. Sweat pricked at my temples. I scanned the platform, but she was nowhere. Gone, as if she had never been there at all. But I knew better. She was still here. Somewhere. Watching. The train doors slid open, revealing an empty carriage. The rows of blue seats sat beneath the harsh glow of fluorescent lights, washed in an unsettling stillness. Something inside me, a force beyond logic or reason, compelled me to step inside. My legs moved before my mind could stop them. The second I crossed the threshold, the doors slammed shut behind me. And then, in the reflection of the train window, I saw it. A face, smooth, featureless, pressed against the glass. It was staring directly at me. "Are you looking for me?" The whisper was right beside my ear. A low, hollow murmur, like a voice stretched too thin across time. It slithered through my bones, chilling me to the core. I spun around. Nothing. The carriage was empty. Only the flickering light at the far end of the train wavered uncertainly, as if ready to go out at any moment. Cold sweat ran down my spine. My fingers dug into the armrest of the seat, my knuckles white with tension. The train raced through the tunnel, the outside world flashing past in streaks of darkness and light. Then, in the glass of the window, I saw it, my shadow. But I wasn't alone. There was another shadow. A figure sitting beside me. It did not move, did not breathe, but I could feel its presence, heavy and unnatural, like a weight pressing against my chest. Another flash of passing light, and for a single, fleeting moment, I saw her. The red dress. The slight sway of fabric. The faceless head turned toward me. She was right there. She tilted her head ever so slightly, staring at me. No eyes. No mouth. No expression. But I knew she was smiling. I wanted to move, to pull away, but she slowly raised a hand toward me. Her fingers trembled, skeletal and cold, as if reaching across an impossible void. Then, in a voice that was cracked and distant, barely more than a whisper, she spoke. "Help me, find me." For the next few days, I couldn't shake her presence. She appeared everywhere, in my dreams, in the reflection of storefront windows, in the glossy surface of train doors. Always there. A blurred figure in the background. A fleeting shadow. A whisper on the edge of my hearing. It had to end. I had to go back. I had to find her. At midnight, I returned to the platform where she had vanished. Then, I stepped into the tunnel. Armed only with a weak flashlight, I pressed forward through the choking darkness, my breath echoing against the damp walls. And then, I found it. A sealed-off maintenance room, hidden deep within the tunnel. A wall, old and cracked, covered in faint, uneven scratches, letters, words, barely readable under layers of dust. I wiped the grime away, and there it was. Isabelle Krüger is buried here. A shiver crawled down my spine. My hands trembled as I reached for the crumbling bricks, prying them loose one by one. Then, a glimpse of red. A tattered piece of fabric, rotting with time. And beneath it, a single, withered hand. Fingers curled, brittle with decay. And then, the distant rumble of an oncoming train. But there were no scheduled trains at this hour. Heart hammering, I turned back toward the tunnel's darkness. And that's when I saw it. A train was approaching. But it wasn't from this world. Its metal frame was corroded, rust-eaten, its headlights dim and flickering. The windows were pure black, empty, soulless voids. And inside the carriage, I saw her. Isabelle. Her face was whole now. Her eyes, sunken yet full of something unreadable. Her lips curved into a smile, one that was both relieved and terrifying. She reached out to me, her voice softer this time, almost pleading. "Take me home." I ran. I ran until I felt the tunnel walls blur past me, until my lungs burned and my legs gave out beneath me. I burst out onto the platform, gasping for air. When I turned back, the tunnel was silent. The body was gone. The police investigated after my report. They tore down the wall where I had found her remains. They found nothing. Records showed that the wall had been sealed the day after the accident and had never been disturbed since. And the midnight train I had seen? There was no such train recorded in the history of Hamburg's metro system. But after that night, the faceless woman was never seen again. The footage stopped reappearing. The platform returned to normal. The whispers ceased. And yet, I know her story isn't over. Because sometimes, in the dead of night, when the world falls silent and my apartment is wrapped in darkness, I still see her. In the reflection of my window. That familiar, blurred face. Smiling. Watching.